1953. Robert Menzies is the Prime Minister of Australia. Is it too loud?
UniqueCarsAndParts.com.
1953. Robert Menzies is the... Hang on, my shorts are falling off a bit. No, I don't think it's not much fun when my shorts fall off, I'll tell you. Well, I'm just backing up. Take 3. 19... Oh, shit. $1953. Robert Menzies is the Prime Minister of Australia. The White Australia policy is still in effect, and most of us are getting around in BMC, I'm believing, or Morris, Austin's. The British car industry was big in Australia. Holden's had only really just come, I think, what would have been the FJ and maybe the FE when this thing, but this is what we're looking at is a 1953 Morris Minor. My mate Dirk is the proud owner, and I'd ask Dirk if you could come and spend a few minutes telling me a little bit about your car.
This car was actually imported from UK, and it was very common in those days. The Brits, to overcome import duties, they used to bring them out what they called in a kit form. They disassembled them and put them in a box, and they were sent to a place in Sydney called Zetland, and there was a factory there where they assembled these cars, and then they were sold out in the Australian market.
So, Australian assembled, were there any Australian manufactured parts on it?
Yes, there are Australian components to this car as well. And the compliance plate states Nuffield Corporation in Australia, Zetland, Sydney, New South Wales.
Okay, which parts were Aussie built?
Some of the radiator parts, some of the other parts, bits and pieces, even some suspension, some of the springs, but most of the components, probably 80% were British.
And before we kick this interview off, Dirk, I asked, is it completely original? Because if I say it's completely original on a YouTube video and it's not, I get hammered a little bit. And you were saying, I was asking about whether these were meant to be chrome or painted. You said that's genuine. They were painted in the day. But even the side strips were painted as well.
Correct. Yeah. All utilities in Australia were not had hardly any chrome on them, and they just come as a basic work vehicle. That's how they were designed, and that's how they were put together.
Now, you've owned this for how many years?
I bought this in 1987, and it was a wreck rust bucket. And when I bought it, I could hardly drive it. The holes were full of rust, and so was the back section. It needed a major overhaul.
Okay, so we'll talk about what you've done to get it on the road and get it in this sort of, well, almost pristine condition. But my first question, why a Morris Minor ute?
Why Morris Minor ute? The wife and I, when we met in 1962, I found one of these, and I paid £50 for it. Exactly the same model as this one. So I had lots of other cars since the first one, and when I saw this in '87, I've got to have this one because it's exactly the same model as the first one I ever owned.
So you met your now wife, you met
Yes.
Judy, met Judy in this, and you used to take her out to the drive-ins in Australia back then?
Yes, yeah, we used to go to drive-in. No heating, no air conditioning. If you
quarter windows though, that's what I used to. You spin them around; they're almost as good.
Oh yeah, not much fun in the drive-in though when you're heavy breathing and watching the screen. It's and it was cold or foggy, and it's not a nice place to be in the middle of winter. So I'm going to tell you that now.
And a split screen. Now, this is before they'd worked out how to sort of warp or make curved glass. So it's common to have flat what they call split screens. Yeah. So Judy couldn't have snuggled into the middle there, not that you could anyway, because it looks like it's got sort of rudimentary bucket seats.
Correct, that's very correct. But my first car actually had a bench seat. They made this with a bench seat as well, which was a bit more convenient for two of us. We could
you could get close to each other.
Yes, correct.
Okay, but are they original, those seats?
They not out of this car. They come out of a standard car. That's where these came from.
Okay. So you bought it in 1987, and you said it was a bit of a rust bucket.
Yes.
How long did it take you to get it on the road?
Try 22 years.
22 years. So I said, what's that? 2010 you got it on the road?
Just after that I got it mobile.
87, 97, 2000. Yeah, that's an awful long time. You're a very patient man, or?
No, the reason of that was I had my own business at the time, my own plumbing business. I originally got a friend to help me with the rebuilding of the bodywork because I couldn't do the welding. So he repaired the bodywork and patched it, and he painted it for me. But when I got the car home in pieces, with my work, I would hopefully work on it on the weekend, but 9 times out of 10 somebody would ring me, have a plumbing problem, and I'd be off working Saturdays, and by the time I came home I didn't feel like doing much work. So it wasn't really until I retired that I really got stuck into finishing this project.
And how far along well, how long have you been retired for now, Dirk?
I've been retired 10 years.
Okay, so and that explains why I got on the road in 2010.
Correct.
Okay, and you've got your ex-plumber on the side here, but this never actually saw work as your plumbing vehicle.
No, I did a little bit, not a great deal. It wasn't my main vehicle, no. No, it wasn't exactly designed for carrying lots of heavy loads, no.
Because if you had it turned up in this car, and I looked out the window and saw this one pull up, I said, oh, this bloke's going to take his time.
Yeah, that's
This is going to be a big bill.
Oh, well, in the old days, plumbers used to ride around on motorbikes with a sidecar with their tools in it. So it's not uncommon, really. The early days, they had a lot of small cars for doing their plumbing work, not like nowadays.
Yeah, and now, so it's been on the road now. You're a member of the Morris Minor Club?
No, it's not the Morris. I did belong to what they call the Morris Register, which is a club in Adelaide which encompasses all Morrises. But I resigned for them last year because, unfortunately, they got a bit cliquey and they wouldn't talk to me because I didn't go to many club meetings. So I now belong to...
Oh, they sent you to the naughty corner.
That's me. The club was in Adelaide, and when I used to go to the meetings, I'd sit in the back corner and nobody would talk to me because I wasn't at regular meetings, you see. So consequently, after 30-odd years, I decided it's time to move on. So I now belong to a club in Malang called the Malang Vintage Machinery Club. And they do cars, trucks and station machinery as well.
Now where's Malang?
Malang is on Lake Alexandrina. It's about 50 kilometres from here where I live on Hindmarsh Island. And it's not too far to drive. And
At the start of the interview, I should have mentioned that I'm at your home and we're visiting. We met each other on the 2015 Gallipoli cruise, which was a 100-year anniversary cruise.
And it was 5 years ago.
Five years ago, and we departed from Fremantle,
Correct.
Went to Albany and followed traced the original voyage, the reenactment of the, and stormed the beaches.
Yes, we did. We certainly got there. And
On buses.
on buses. Yeah, we did. We did the sights of Gallipoli's on bus.
We didn't get in boats to storm the beaches. We just casually sauntered up.
One thing I did notice when we went to Sri Lanka, there was quite a few of these cars in Sri Lanka. And apparently India, Sri Lanka has still got a quite high ratio of these English cars that they still keep running.
Well, they managed to keep them running, don't they? As you've made this one keep running. So let's just cover off some of the things you've had to do to it to keep it on the road. And you showed me some photos inside, and I'll put them up on the video so people can see what you've done. But you said a bit of a rust bucket. What was required?
Oh, but it needed a new floor in the driving compartment. It needed a new floor in the back, the ute part. A lot of the mud guards rusting out. The front forks, typical British, they're black steel. They had rusted, and we could get new parts for those and weld them on, and get by that way, which is fine. But it was just typical pockets where rust and dirt gets in and they go rusty. It's not uncommon, it's typical of those cars.
And the engine is the trusty BMC, or was it BMC back then?
Yeah, British Motor Corporation motor. The original motors in these were a side valve, but this particular model actually is an overhead valve. But they were actually a motor that came out of the Austin A30.
And so not ahead of its time, really.
No. You see, Morris didn't have an overhead valve motor, but when they combined with Austin, they became British Motor Corporation, and they took that motor over and put it in this car.
Well, far more modern design, I think, but just judging when we had a look under the bonnet, it looked fairly old. Can we? We'll have a look under the bonnet now and have a chat. Okay, Dirk, we're at the business end of the Morris Minor. It is a Morris, yeah. The Morris
Series 2.
The series. There was a Series 1.
Yeah, Series 1, Series 2.
Okay, and when did they originally come out? The Series 1.
Series 1 they came out about 1951, and the Series 2 came out in 1953.
Okay, and they ran until
1956, and that's when they became the Morris 1000.
Okay, so this is a trusty engine. It looks very neat and very, very clean, and obviously had some sort of restoration done to it.
Yes, it has. The only thing is with this motor, it's actually not the original motor. The original motor was an 8 horsepower, 803. This is actually a 1000 motor. So the only difference I did, I changed the motor, I changed the gearbox, I changed the diff, because it's a little bit better motor, a better gearbox and a better diff because of the size of the motor, but the shape's exactly the same as the other one.
You mean to tell me this, but it's smaller capacity than that?
Originally, it was only an 8 horsepower. You see, this is a what they call a 945, which is the, what they call 1,000, minus 1,000 motor.
Yeah, okay. It almost looks what you'd sort of see on a lawnmower.
Yeah, actually, probably some lawnmowers have got bigger motors. This is only 10 horsepower, bigger motors than that.
Yeah, but can it get up to cruising speed?
I've had it up to 80 kilometres an hour, but I wouldn't want to do it too often.
80 clicks.
Well, 80 clicks, that's quite fast.
Yeah, well, you won't get any speeding tickets in this baby then.
No. And the only other modification, it's got the air cleaner. The air cleaner used to be an oil bath, which some people would recognise, and it was a much higher thing. This is it's got a proper filter in it, you see. So yes. I put that in there.
And where did you get that from?
I bought it second hand from a wrecker's yard.
And from what sort of car though?
They did come out of Morris's and Austin's, and it fitted neatly on there.
It looks terrific. The battery looks fairly neat.
That's fairly modern. Yes.
But about the only protection between you and an accident.
Oh, that's about it. You go. Yeah. And the other thing that's not brand new is the fuel pump. That's not the visual fuel pump. That's an aftermarket model, made in New Zealand. They still make them over there.
Really?
Yes.
But these cars have got such a following.
Yeah, New Zealand had the highest numbers of British cars up until 25 years ago, because the New Zealand government restricted a lot of imports, and so they kept all their English cars and kept them up to scratch until about 25 years ago.
Okay, and well, I think we might switch to an interior. A look at the interior, shall we?
Yeah.
So, Dirk, we're inside the trusty Morris Ute. It is tight.
Yeah, you could say that. It's tight, but it wasn't designed for people like you. It was designed for Judy and I. It was fairly small at the time.
What are you saying? I need to lose weight?
Oh, I didn't say that. It's just it's more designed for people like me that are fairly short. Yes.
Look, Dirk, my head's touching the roof, so
you're right. That's dead right. See, look at my clearance. See, plenty of room.
My belly's touching the dash.
Yes, that's true too. Now, there's no adjustment on the seat, so you can't put the seat back or anything like that.
This is as far back as it goes.
That's correct. Yes.
Well, and I've got to bend down a little bit to see out the windscreen.
I don't have any problems. I can see quite well.
Well, you're a little bit shorter than me.
Correct.
What are you, 4'6"?
5'7".
5'7".
Yes.
There we go. Well,
yes. It does make a big difference.
I'm 6'3", so that explains it. Okay, so inside, what have we got? We've got miles per hour, Smiths, and you've got a red line on the.
Yeah, well, actually, it's really more kilometres an hour, because I've changed the gearing in the gearbox for this Speedo, so it's really more reflects kilometres an hour down rather than in miles an hour.
Okay, so but it's an original miles per hour.
That's correct.
But you've got it so you know that it's kilometres an hour.
Correct.
And why have you got the red line at 30?
That was the British speed limit in England, you see, 30 miles an hour. That was around the city. That was the basic city speed limit, 30 miles an hour.
Okay, and you got a fuel gauge, obviously pretty mandatory, and an oil.
The fuel gauge works, but not the oil gauge. I've made couple of modifications here.
Yeah, so you got a temperature gauge. That's pretty.
I put that in, and this is a new oil gauge there, because this one packed up, and this is much more accurate. This one here.
Yeah. Now you're telling me you had a problem when you're taking across to the mainland, and something happened with the gear. Was it the gearbox?
No, it was the oil pump.
The oil pump.
On the way home from Goolwa, which is about 11 kilometres from where we live,
yep.
It started making funny noises, and then the oil pressure gauge went to 0. And luckily the wife was behind me, and we pulled up, and I realised there was something wrong with the oil pump situation, and she started to overheat. I had to pull up fairly quick to stop the motor from seizing.
And just on top of it, you've got a red light on top.
Yeah, that's connected to the generator, alternator. This works. And if something's wrong, this comes on. It will glow.
Okay, and this is this.
That's the wiper control.
Okay, so and they are electric wipers.
Yes, they do work.
Because of this vintage Holden, they'd have been vacuum operated.
No, well, these are electric.
And were they always electric?
Yes, they were
ahead of the time. But is that an ashtray?
Yes, that's the ashtray. Yes. I don't smoke, but I used to put my coins in there. You see.
Okay.
So every car had an ashtray, don't forget.
Yes.
Now,
well, smoking was a big thing back then.
And this is not original. These are the indicators.
Yes.
And never had indicators on this car.
Right.
The British cars had the little side ones that come out They were on an arm, you see.
Yes.
But not the utes. They never had the side indicator to come out. So there's never any indicators on these.
And we've got choke,
Lights, starter.
starter.
Yep.
Yes.
Right. Oh, you're going to pull that to start it?
Pull starter. You turn that on.
There's no key.
The key's there.
Oh, sorry. Yeah,
Right,
of course.
See that?
Yep.
There's the fuel pump. Oops. No, it's gone flat again.
I'll get us out of trouble.
Yeah.
And this is the glove box, or
You
no?
press the button. Yeah.
Oh, that button opens.
Oh, yeah, that's high tech.
That's great. Well, shall we go for a drive, Dirk?
Yeah. But, mate,
Okay, I'll just.
go back to that starting.
No, yeah.
No, you ain't going.
So here we are in Dirk's 1953 Morris Minor utility, and it is cramped. I can wind the window down, and I can even open the side vent.
Yeah, you push it.
Push that out. Get a
That's your
little.
ventilation. That's your air conditioning.
Oh,
Much better.
it's actually when you're at speed, it's not too bad.
No.
Has it got sync commission first?
And that's the second, did it? Yeah, that is, but I should have doubled the clutch.
So I should have asked how many gears has it got. I'm guessing it's got four.
Four forward and one reverse.
Four forward, one
Yeah,
reverse.
the model before this only had a 3-speed box. This is a better one, better gear model.
So that was the Series 2, came with 4-speed.
Yeah,
so
but
the Series.
it only had three forwards and one reverse, and the early one.
Ah,
This is a much better version.
you really feel at one with the road, don't you?
Yeah, you do. And it makes it feel as though you're going faster. Judy worries because she doesn't want to travel like this. But it's not really that fast. We're doing about 50 kilometres an hour now. One big problem with these cars was the brakes. The brakes were never very good. So when you get to the corner up here, I tend to use my gears a lot. Help slow it down.
It's only got drum brakes all the way around.
Very
isn't it?
small drum brakes, they're not very big. And that's the problem with these. They weren't designed for high speed. I mean, if I kept going like this and tried to pull up, I'd be struggling. So that's why I tend to use the gears a lot.
So this would be a really hard car to drive in traffic.
Oh, today, yeah, but not when this car was designed.
Not in 1953.
All other cars were similar to these.
Similar, so everyone knew you had to give plenty of room and
Yes, that's right.
start braking a lot
Yeah,
earlier.
That's correct.
Well, that's an awful long time you've been slowing down, Dirk.
Yeah. But I'm a bit cautious because the modern day drivers, they don't care about these cars. They're very irresponsible and they're very selfish is the word, you know? They tend to look at us, get out the way, you beast, you shouldn't even be on the road. It's actually, for me, it's a pleasure to drive because you're driving a car. You're not like a modern car. You just get in and put it in auto and just let it drive itself.
Yeah.
These you have to concentrate. I don't mind driving these, but my wife, she hates it. She doesn't like the noise. She worries about the brakes. So consequently, she doesn't travel as much as this, like she used to. We're heading towards the Murray Mouth now.
The Murray Mouth.
Yes, Mighty River Murray.
You give it a little squirt on the accelerator when you change gears.
It's much better. You see, you're better off what they call double clutch. You do it twice with these older cars. It's smoother to change gears.
It's actually a lot more comfortable inside than I thought it was going to be. I was imagining it was going to be absolutely terrible, but it's good.
The seats are not as comfortable on long distance. They're not like a bucket seat where they come down. These seats are rounded, and I find they're not as good as they should be. So, for long distance, it's a beast of a car to drive. The longest distance I've done is about 70 kilometres, And that after 70 kilometres, your legs feel it, then your hips feel it. It's not like a modern car, they're so comfortable to drive. But I'm planning to take this one to the Bay to Bird, South Australia's big rally, which is on every second year for this vintage. And it goes from Glenelg to Birdwood, and Birdwood back to our place.
Now Birdwood's up in the Barossa, isn't it?
Up there, like,
And there's the National Motor Museum's up there too.
Yes. Every second year, this vintage, and the alternate years, this cars after 1970 onwards. And it's the different class of cars that go in the rallies. But this year's the 40th anniversary coming up, and I was actually in the second rally in 1982. Not this car, in another car. It was a Morris 8, 1948 Morris 8, and I did that twice, 1982 and 1984. But I've done the Bay to Birdwood in this twice already, and I want to do it this year as well.
So every second year they have cars with this vintage come to the Bay to Birdwood.
Yes.
And when you say this vintage, what are we saying?
After 1960s, cars go the following year, but
Yes.
before 1960, cars from 1905 on to 1960.
Okay, well this qualifies by 7 years.
Yes, yes.
So what are we looking at over here, Dirk? Is that the mouth of the Murray there?
Just here we got you can see just in the distance, you see a couple of dredges,
Yes.
and they're dredging the Murray mouth, and it's continuous. If they don't dredge the mouth, it would silt up. This happened some years ago, and the mouth would just close off. Because of the lack of flow of water coming down the river, it's not scouring the bottom of the river, and it's not taking the sand away. So,
And what's the consequence of them of silting up and blocking the...
well, it destroys the ecosystem. The fish life and the bird life would be devastated. The bird life and the fish, they need water changing all the time. You cannot have stagnant water because it's high salinity and high salt, which is not good for the breeding of the stocks.
Now, I believe there's a series of, not bridges, but things that stop the fresh water getting into the saltwater part.
Called the barrage.
So you're on Hindmarsh Island, one half, and the half that you're on, saltwater.
Yes, we're on saltwater side now.
And the others, if I was to go to the other side of Hindmarsh
that's
Island?
freshwater.
Freshwater.
Yes.
And it's stopped by these
That is barrages. It stops the
barrages. Okay.
When you have a massive flow of water, they open the barrages and let the water flow through.
Uh-huh.
And then at the moment, the barrages are closed to keep the fresh water in.
And is that fresh water used for drinking or?
For major irrigation and some drinking, but most of our water comes from a reservoir about 60 kilometres from here.
Okay.
So yeah, this is the mighty Murray River, as you can see. But fortunately, it's a bit like everything in Australia. We overexploited some of our resources, and consequently of this, we've got to keep doing this. We've got to keep dredging.
And then when you say overexploited, it's because too much water's taken out of the Murray.
Too much water
so
upstream.
the flow's not big enough now.
Irrigation, towns, cotton, rice.
Got to be careful with sending like greenies, Dirk.
No, I'm not a greenie. I believe that we should share our resources, but because we've been in drought for the last 4 or 5 years, most of the upstream areas where the water naturally falls hasn't had the rainfall like we've had in the past. So hopefully this year or next year we get a good downpour and it'll help our environment. Because the Murray-Darling Basin is very vital to South Australia, New South Wales and Victoria. It's a very important resource. With the population growing, naturally it's going to be more stress on our resources, especially water and land. But we've had a bit of luck in Queensland and New South Wales. They've had some really good downpours, and things are looking much better after the fires. It's certainly looking much better than what it was 2 or 3 months ago.
Yeah. I've just got the coronavirus to tend with now.
Oh, well, that's a different kettle of fish. That's going to cause more problems than we think. It's going to affect our economy and our tourism.
Okay, that took you a few attempts to get it into first.
Yeah, sometimes first gear.
Sometimes a bit reluctant.
Yeah, but it's easy to just put it in second. And
You need me to put my hand out there and sort of give a signal?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Indicating.
I indicated, yes.
So we're on a tourist drive around Hindmarsh Island.
That's correct, yes.
a nice little spot here. Captain Charles Sturt came in 1830 and he discovered this island. He came down the Murray River from Upper Chuka Way. Australia's got one of the highest ratio of old cars, vintage cars, classic cars in the world. Because of our climate, it makes a big difference, you know, preserving old cars. And, I mean, people are still finding cars in garages or farms in barns that have been sitting there 30, 40 years. And they restore them and bring it back to life. It's incredible what is still out there. When I was at the car show a month ago, at Chunga, what they call All British Car Day, somebody brought out a Mini Cooper that had been sitting in a shed for 20 years, and they got the thing going. They left all the dust and dirt on it, and it just came out of this shed, and they brought it to a Chunga British Car Show. It was incredible to find a car, you know, that was so popular. The Mini Coopers were a very, very good car,
Really
good
good
racing car
yeah.
as well.
Well, they won Bathurst,
Yes.
and I interviewed the curator of the Bathurst Motor Museum,
Oh wow.
and we spoke about that and the Cortinas. So the
Yeah,
British
yeah.
cars were,
Yes.
you know, until the V8s came along, the Monaro once, the
Yeah.
GT Falcon, of course, multiple times, and,
Yes.
and then the Tirana, Dominance,
That's right.
and then it sort of all went a bit askew with the Sierras.
Yep.
So we didn't quite understand that as an Aussie, watching it was a Ford, but it was a Ford that you don't see on the roads.
That's correct. Yes.
So I sort of felt a bit weird about that.
But in England, they used to race these and Austins, you know, and around the racetracks and Austin A30s, and I've seen them going around. Unbelievable, you know, the tiny little cars racing around these tracks. This car was the VW of Britain. You know, the Germans, the VW was millions produced, and this was their car that they mass produced in very large numbers.
Do you know how many they built?
It's probably close to a couple of million. I'm not quite sure the exact number, but it's probably a couple of million. When they see this particular model only had basic changes from from just after 1950 till 1970. It had just modifications like single piece glass, a little bit bigger motor, the dash changed slightly. The body shape, it stayed the same for close to 20 years. By the time the British stopped making Morris Minors, they were only making 30,000 maximum a year towards the end, and they just weren't selling. So really it hadn't changed a great deal over that 20-year period.
Well, my mum tells me that her first car as a young woman was a Morris Minor convertible.
Yes, they were very common.
I feel sorry for its gearbox.
Oh, she wasn't very good at it.
No.
See, the gearbox before this one wasn't as good. It was probably more of a crash box than this one. And they're only 3-speed, and so they weren't as fast as these. They're a lot slower. There's the little airfield there.
So this is got, you can get this up to 80 kilometres an hour.
Oh,
If they weren't as fast, what did we say? Top speed is 60.
Yeah, yes. I'll get up to over 60. Just get the feeling of it. We're doing 65 now. How's that?
Well, it feels like we're going faster.
Yes, and that's what Judy doesn't like.
Yeah.
So I'm just easing off now. They're just a magic little car that is so simple. And everything is bolted together. The whole bodywork is just bolted together in bits and pieces. The cabin is separate, the front is a bit separate, and the back section. It's all bolted onto the chassis, and it's all bolted together.
Did that make it easier to restore?
Yes. See this bit behind me here?
Yep.
That's got a rubber piece in there. That pack bit was bolted onto this. So it makes it a lot easier when you're restoring it. Because when I pulled it apart, we had the body like an acid type bath thing, you know, and had it cleaned up and got rid of all the rust. This actually was painted about the early 90s,
But it's sat in my garage for a long time before I actually had time to start putting it back together. The chap that did it for me lived in Adelaide. There was a place called Woodside, and he did all the body work for me. But when I got it home, I put it all together myself.
And you decided to sort of take the paint off some of the chrome parts.
Oh, well, I had those re-chromed, you see. But these wipers came from England. I bought them when there was the UK.
Okay.
And I bought bits and pieces back from England all the time. We went there about 4 times.
Is there a lot of these still running around in England?
In England, there's actually warehouses you can buy every part you want for these. You know, they've took up quite a few of these over there, but you can buy all the parts you want. You can build a whole car out of all the spare parts they got over there. But it's expensive, of course. But there's agencies in Australia, Melbourne and Sydney. You ring them up and tell them what you want, and they just mail whatever parts you want. But they get most of their supplies from England. Like most cars, you know, most vintage cars or classics, there's plenty of spares available. The Americans are very good at spares for cars, reproduction stuff.